And I'll say that my name's Andrew Stuck and I'm from Walk, Listen, Create. And this is a Walking Writers Salon with Kathryn Tann. And a quick update on Walk, Listen, Create. I think most of you in the room know it already, but we're a not-for-profit. We're registered in Belgium. We try to support artists, performers and writers who make work on foot to be consumed on foot or about walking. And that's a sort of niche of a niche. So we're probably getting towards being sort of the largest global network. We've got approximately 1,800 contributors in the community. So thanks very much for coming along. Okay, how the Walking Writers Salon works. It works that I have a quick chat with the guest, Kathryn. We then open it up to you guys and you fire away some questions, but hopefully, because I know one or two of you are writers, we can get a little bit of discussion going, which isn't just back and forth question and answers. And then the final 10 minutes is a multiple choice quiz. So I need to tell you that Kalon Books, who are the publishers of Kathryn's book, Seaglass, have kindly offered up a couple of books. They're also offering to anyone in the room a 20% discount on purchase of the book. So if you don't win it, you can buy it for 20% off. So that's the idea then. So I'm going to read Kathryn's introduction, which she wrote on her Walk, Listen, Create profile. So if you haven't filled in your own Walk, Listen, Create profile, here's an example of one which gives you a hint that you could try writing one of your own, because it's about the only way we get to know 1,800 people is to have a look at their profiles and see what they're going on. The other side to it is that if you want to be a guest on a salon, you can do that too, because Kathryn approached us, if I remember rightly. We didn't approach Kathryn. So there you go. So there's give you a clue of what can go on. So let's see if I can read to you what Kathryn wrote. She wrote, I'm a writer, editor and creative producer from the south coast of Wales. I've published numerous pieces and stories, and my debut essay collection, Seaglass, is out in May 2024 with Kalon Books. Now a freelancer, I have 7 years experience in content, publishing, podcasting and creative audio, as well as programming for New Writing North. With an English degree from Durham University and a creative writing master's from the University of Manchester, I've spent lots of time in the north of England and am currently settled on a lovely and unpredictable banks of the River Ouse in York. So the title of the book, Kathryn, is Seaglass, but could you try and explain what Seaglass is? What
Sure.
the book is titled after, what the, what's it all about? What is Seaglass?
Yeah. So it's all the nice greeny, bluey blobs on the cover behind your head there. I've got a copy here as well. And it's for me, Seaglass is a really lovely sort of relay bit of teamwork between nature and humans where we have dumped unwanted glass or dropped or smashed or lost unwanted glass, and the sea has turned it into something really quite pretty that you can sort of spot on a beach and pick up. And I'm a real magpie for sea glass. I always have been, just because, among all the sort of brown grey pebbles on a beach, if you see a little glint of sort of light shining through a bit of green or a bit of blue, it's always very exciting. So it's something to collect and to look out for. And I've got quite the collection, I think, from over the years.
Okay, well, I'm going to jump in quickly and ask Ali Pretty, who's on the screen as Kinetica People. She did a project called Beach of Dreams, or is currently doing a project on Beach of Dreams. But Ali, do you want to unmute yourself and just say what you discovered on the beach somewhere, which is quite extraordinary?
Yeah, Kathryn, it's really great to see you here. And yeah, the Beach of Dreams is actually a quest to find the Beach of Dreams, because we started the journey in the Beach of Broken Dreams, and we were doing a walking project along the banks of the River Thames, and I was working with the writer Kevin Rushby. He's the Guardian travel journalist, and every day he was writing a daily blog, and he said he'd never been east of Greenwich. So we were heading out east from Tilbury to East Tilbury, and it was a sunny September day with low light hitting this particular foreshore, and so he was caught by the glistening on this foreshore of a very scruffy bit of the Thames. So he dived down to the river, and he said, "My God, what is this? This is amazing. This whole beach is shining." And someone said, "Well, it's because it's a dump, and it's a dump from 1945 Blitz. So all the kind of domestic rubble that had been bombed in London got dumped in Thurrock, and as the tide washes in and out, it reveals the bits of the glass. So it's actually probably a lesser known glass beach, because I think yours is in Seaham, isn't it? The one in, which I've also done some Beach of Dreams stuff on. Anyway, so this was he wrote what dreams would happen when the bomb went off. This is a beach of broken dreams. So I was like, well, where is the Beach of Dreams? So we're in an ever constant quest for the Beach of Dreams, and which is metaphorically that all the gems along the foreshore represents, you know, a gem of hope in a community or in a landscape, and we're trying to, you know, metaphorically walk around the UK collecting these gems, shining a spotlight. And they are. So there's a big connection. And when I saw this and I saw that it was on that beach in Durham, I was like, oh, I've got to be here. So
yeah. That's one of the. I mean, I grew up on the south coast of Wales, which has quite a lot of Seaglass, but nowhere near the kind of concentration you get in the northeast because of the old glassworks up there. But I did recently find a river beach in the really kind of unknown little bit near Morpeth that I just stumbled across, and it was full of broken glass, and it was all from it had all come downriver about a mile from Morpeth about 100 years ago from an old pub, and it was all their glassware. And all their bottles and glasses, and that was really interesting. Anyway, tangent.
On the cover of your book, you've only got blue and green, but sea glass can be any color, can't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of brown, but that's not quite aesthetically pleasing as aesthetically pleasing. And clear as well, but colors beyond that are quite rare. And there's actually a bit of a sort of kind of like collector's rare finds. You know, if you find purple or if you find orange, that's very exciting, and it's worth more if you wanted to make jewelry and sell it.
All right, well, okay, well, let's get back to your book. The book is a collection of essays. So let's start. Can you sort of tell us what is an essay and why you're drawn to writing essays, which are, if I'm right in saying, a non-fiction memoir, etc. So tell us a little bit more about what's an essay and why you writing essays.
So I think what I didn't realize before I got more into writing essays was that there aren't that many rules really with essays, which is I think why I like them so much. I'd only ever written academic essays, and there's actually, you can be quite creative with the essay form. I approach it a bit more like short stories, but just in the sense that I use scenes and characters, but constructing them feels quite different. It feels more like maybe like reportage or memoir, but they're shorter form than a longer memoir, and a little bit tighter maybe in the way that a short story is. And yeah, I think one of the I came across them in a module in my MA in creative writing that was being taught by the very brilliant Horatio Clare, and he sort of introduced me to writing essays creatively, and I just got hooked, and I've pretty much only written essays ever since. I'd been toiling away at a novel for a number of years, which I did carry on toiling away at, but alongside that, I started to just really love the essay form. And yeah, the fact that each essay I wrote could be a bit different or could be very different.
Yeah, and the book actually has some essays which sort of run to 10, 15 pages, and others that run to about 200 lines or less, 200 words. So Yeah, can an essay be any length at all? I mean, is that what it is?
I mean, I think so, in the way that a short story can kind of be whatever length you want it to be. And the little snippets I have in between the fuller essays, I guess I didn't think of those quite as essays. They're in my mind, they're more like pictures. They're kind of, often with essay collections you have artwork or photos in between each essay, and I kind of wanted to do that with words, and just also as an excuse to just kind of put in a few extra places and some sort of nature writing for the sake of nature writing, because normally you, like, an essay needs to be about something a little bit more than just a nice river, but if it's a really short little piece, you can kind of just, it's a bit like poetry, you can just focus on the imagery and the feeling, and not worry about telling a story. So those shorter ones do something a bit different. Whereas I think for a longer essay, it does kind of need to have a bit more substance to it.
Okay, so tell us, what's the process? Did the publisher say we want these 12, or did you say I want to shape it in this way? I mean, so how was the collection put together? Had you written them all before and then the publisher came along, or did they commission any, or did they say, oh, by the way, it's a bit of a gap, we could do with one of these? How was it sort of kind of put together? Where and how much power did you have as the author over the publisher, and how much, what was the sort of tension, or was there any?
Callum were brilliant. I was really lucky. So I wrote, there's an essay in here called Return to Water, which is the longest essay in the book, and it was the first one I wrote. And it was that essay that was highly commended in a prize, the New Welsh Writers Awards, that caught Callum's attention, and they were setting up a new imprint, because they're actually sort of centrally run by the University of Wales Press, but they're setting up a new trade non-fiction imprint, and they got in touch asking if that essay was part of a longer project, and I initially panicked and asked my friend, what do I do? And she said, obviously you tell them it's part of a longer project. And as soon as I sort of had a think of, like, okay, if I could do an essay collection, what would it look like? I knew exactly what it would look like. So I had some essays already written, I had lots more ideas, so I put together a proposal for them, and laid out roughly what the essays would be and what each one would be about. I didn't know the order they would be in, and actually quite often with essays, you think it's about one thing and sometimes it kind of turns into, it actually reveals something else. So there was an openness to that. My editor was brilliant, and she was happy to just let me go off and spend a year making it happen, sort of within reason. And that's a really nice position to be in for a debut author, especially, and the sort of trust that they had. But I think partly, again, because of the essay form, I did have a certain amount of flexibility, and if something wasn't working, I could have gone back and said, actually, this essay that I've said I would write, I need to write about something else instead. And I think I added a couple of essays as well that weren't in my proposal. So yeah, they were really brilliant, and we had a good relationship. So yeah.
Okay, well, I teased you earlier on, actually, in a conversation we had when we were talking about the book, because I said that it's not much about any walking in here. I know there is at least one essay on walking, but it's actually more about wild swimming, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's about all sorts of things, I think, and swimming does come up quite a lot.
I admit, if you're going to go and do wild swimming, you're going to have to walk to get there.
Yeah. I know,
Yeah.
they kind of, I don't really separate them too much in my mind, because often one comes with the other, and going for a swim and walking through a woodland is a very similar activity, I think, really, in the sort of benefits it has, and the thoughts that come, and the feelings you get. Like, I don't know, I think it's sort of just being outside, whether that's walking or just sitting, or swimming or not swimming, but just being in water, any of those things. I kind of think
yeah. But however, you do talk about how much you enjoy swimming per se in the swimming pool, which is sort of kind of weird, because that would be like walking up and down the shopping precinct. I mean, I have to say that I've you know, I find swimming in a swimming pool utterly dull, and and swimming per se not terribly exciting either. Much because I can't hold a conversation with someone. So you're kind of, is that the wild swimming is actually, jumping into a pond with friends, or is it something that you know you
Often it is with other people. I think it has different. For me, it's a very different activity if you're on your own and if you're with other people. If you're with other people, it's sort of like a fun thing to do. And if you're on your own, it's more of a meditative thing to do. And on the swimming in a pool, I think the reason I like that is because it's boring. You don't have anything to do, and you can't listen to music either, whereas you can on a treadmill or something.
I think people now do have,
Oh yeah, well, I'm not investing in underwater headphones, but I quite like that it's rhythmic and you're alone with your thoughts, and it's actually also very meditative. It's very good for thinking, which is the main reason I like swimming in a pool.
Okay, well, one of the essays or parts of the book is actually very small vignettes of different things that happen around food, and I asked you if you could, if you were happy to read one, and the reason why I've chosen this one, I have to say, is Kathryn's written really well about things like a barbecue or about pickled onions or things like that, which are reminiscences from various different experiences in her childhood and growing up. And she wrote one. It hasn't got a title, but I know what the last line is, and I'm not going to say it because that kind of spoils it. But but there's one that she wrote about, which is absolutely spot on for my life as a child. There's something that happened every year, and was chaotic in the hands of my mother. But I'd like to read it.
Yeah, and yeah. So this essay is. I wanted to write about food, but I didn't want to drive any big point home or make a grand statement. I kind of just wanted to enjoy. Is plotting my life basically in food memories in the hopes that other people can read them and relate or think of their own food memories. So yeah, this is the one. Steam drips at the kitchen windows and you're breathing a sweet Seville orange fug. The enormous cauldron is on the hob and Mum is scrutinising a china saucer, tilting it steep, running her finger through the syrup and froth. The empty jars are baking in the oven. The big tin, full of paper parchment, discs and doilies, is open on the table. It's marmalade day.
Okay, well, to me, that's absolutely reminiscent of my childhood because I spent so much time putting little bits of tissue on top of jam jars of jam or marmalade that wasn't quite setting. So it's sort of like runny marmalade. And yeah, I remember you had a cellophane with a rubber band, and you sort of put it tight across the top and you heated the jar. So something to do with, I know, keeping the cellophane on the top. And my mother made 120 jars of marmalade every year.
Wow.
And it was absolute chaos because she'd always forget to do something and one ingredient wouldn't go in or something.
Yeah. It comes out different every year and we were never quite sure why. It was like, oh yeah, that year was a really good year for the marmalade. Like wine. It was a good vintage.
Oh, and one year she forgot to put the weight on the pressure cooker. She was cooking them in pressure cooker, and they blew up through where the weight goes on the top and sprayed the entire kitchen. So yeah, it was sort of chaos all the time. So even that very small piece that you wrote, which was possibly 80 or 100 words long, brought home something to me. And that I have to say, members of the audience, there are little vignettes. I don't call them vignettes, but little pieces like that Kathryn has included about different pertinent points in her foodie life. So those are some things that come up. And yeah, and then in a sense, let's get on to the walking essay, because I actually asked you to read something from a walking essay. In the past, we've always had guests choose the pieces. This time I did it the other way around. I thought, well, damn it, well, I want to get this author to read her writing and the bits that I like. So you're now going to hear her read a little bit from the walk. Is it the walking essay, or there are actually two essays in there?
Walking comes into a few of them. This has the most walking in it, and it is plotted. The essay is physically plotted by a walk that I did with the National Trust in Marsden Moors. So that kind of structures, that landscape structures the essay.
And can you tell people where Marsden Moor is, although you're about to give them an OS Squid reference? But
it's just the north, sort of gateway to the peaks on the north side, so very near. It's just outside Huddersfield, which is where we were living at the time. So yeah, and it's managed by the National Trust, and it's a really lovely place. It was where we sort of went to in lockdown when we couldn't. It was exactly 15 minutes from where we lived, so that was our refuge through lockdown. Well, second half of the second lockdown. Okay, so this section starts with a grid reference, which is exactly where we are at the point in the essay, which is southeast 041.135, if anyone wants to know. I walk quietly in the gap between the hikers at the front and the ramblers at the back. I rest my eyes on the path we follow through the aftermath. A ribbon of survival cutting through the middle, too compacted and worn to have offered any fuel. Moorland fires are not uncommon around Marsden, but they are becoming disturbingly frequent. Barbecues and campfires are entirely banned across the National Trust's managed estate here, but that doesn't stop the occasional fool, perhaps a cigarette smoker or a kid with a firework, from setting the landscape alight. Here, a fire spreads quickly, and the ancient peat can smoke for weeks. Walking between two expanses of char, I want to say something, to ease it all into acknowledgement, to pin my feelings down with language before they drift off with the dust and settle somewhere else. But I don't know any of the people I've come here with, none of their names or voices. The questions I want to ask the park ranger, the volunteers, and Paul carousel themselves around my mind. The ash glitters like coal dust in the high sun, and I walk on.
well, great, thank you. Yeah, no, I thought that was great. I was saying to Kathryn before we sort of came live, which is it's really infuriating in a sense that one chooses a passage or a quote from an author, and it almost gives the impression that you've written off the rest of whatever they've written, you know, which is not the case at all. Some really, really lovely stuff that Kathryn has written about, and she writes really well. There are a couple of questions in the chat, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask you about your mum's gem dictionary. Because I'm of an age where I remember the Collins Gem English Dictionary very well, and you've got some good stories there about what you find in the back pages of the Gem Dictionary. But for those, can you explain to people what a Gem Dictionary is, perhaps, if there's anyone in the room who doesn't know a Gem Dictionary? Maybe...
Yeah, I've actually got my mum's one here. It's a little pocket dictionary that they I mean, I imagine they still make them, they just don't look like this anymore. And it's got Bible thin pages, and yeah, I mean, it's a standard dictionary, but it also has at the back, which I didn't realize for years, lots of little sort of guides of like weights and measures and tables of things, important events in British and foreign history, just like random little pages of information at the back, which piqued my interest.
And what's more, not only piqued your interest, but you wrote an essay about them. So, you know, what I think is brilliant is that you can take something which is full of words and full of meanings, and then actually rustle back to the index and the back end and write something about that. So that's great. But okay, so Anne-Marie, would you like to ask your question?
Would you like me to ask it in person. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay, let me start my video. Okay, sorry, there were people coming and going. That's why I didn't want to distract anyone with things going on. I just wanted to ask Kathryn, you know, you talked a bit in your book about, you know, how your experiences in nature had helped you with, like, you know, various challenges in your life. And I just wanted to know if you wanted to talk about that a bit and give a specific example of how your relationship to nature had helped with that.
Yeah, so I think the sort of most obvious example of that is what I write about in Return to Water, which is that first essay I wrote. And that was the first piece of memoir I'd ever written, really. And it was about my relationship with my appearance and going through quite a few years of chronic acne. And I stopped swimming for quite a long period of time, and I think without even properly realizing that I had. And my sort of recovery from that, not just physically, but my like sort of internal recovery and my relationship with myself improving, I could sort of mark that with waypoints of coming back to water, and being able to swim again and feeling comfortable, immersing myself in water again. And I think that is a really sort of clear-cut way in which nature helped me. It wasn't even only natural water, but that is something that I've always really loved and has been really important to me. So it became a motivation, as well as a as well as a therapy. But saying that, I'm not someone who is lucky enough to be able to wild swim all the time. I don't do it. I'm also not hardy enough to do it all the time. I just do it sort of as and when I get the chance, especially because I grew up by the sea. So it's sort of something I try and do when I can. But being outside, I think, has always been important to me. And during times like during the pandemic, trying to find some kind of green space or somewhere that I could be under open sky was just kind of a fact of life that I knew it was important without having to explain why. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I got that because I mean, I used to live by the sea in Australia, and I live in London now. And whenever I feel like really tense or, you know, stressed, or you get that sort of static in your body of sitting and writing in front of a computer all day, I'm kind of desperate to, I mean, what I really want is to kind of go to a sea pool on the coast of Sydney, but, you know, I can't do that. So, I mean, when I found the canal in London, the Regent's Canal, that was, for me, it was like, it's water, you know, I don't swim in it, I can't swim in it, but just being near it, I find very calming. And yeah, so I got that, you know, I just thought it was interesting about your book, about talking about that sort of going to nature and kind of replenishing yourself through that, and, you know, how it helps you.
Yeah, I think, and I think it's really important to, like you say, to look for that where you can, rather than where, you know, it's not about being ideal. Like it's not all or nothing, basically. I don't live in the countryside, and I don't get out of the city as often as I'd like to, but I can sort of take my coffee outside in the morning, because I'm lucky enough to have a back garden now, and I can sort of smell the air and notice the weather, and that's something in itself. Or when I was in Manchester and I found the canals, I was able to walk along those, even though it was this little strip of concrete and then the water that obviously you can't swim in. So it doesn't really matter what it is. I think there's no right way of doing it, and actually looking for it, looking for that kind of balm in the unexpected places is really important as well.
Yeah. And it's a great essay as well.
Well, Kathryn, I was going to jump in and say, when you were writing that essay, was that a form of therapy too? You know, about sort of overcoming the memories that you had that were related to your complexion. Was that you know, and do you find writing about your past and what's happened to you as being some kind of therapy or not? Maybe I'm reading too much into that.
No, I think, like I said, so that essay Turn to Water was the first piece of memoir that I'd written, really.
And that was the one that won you the prize, was it?
Yeah, it was the first sort of full-length extended creative essay that I'd written, and it was surprisingly personal. And I say surprisingly because I didn't really set out to write memoir, and all of a sudden I've got an essay collection out that is very much described by a lot of people as memoir. But that essay in particular, I wanted to write about swimming, because I love nature writing, and I'd been told by my classmates at the time that when I write about the sea and the outdoors, those were their favourite bits. I thought, right, I'm going to have a whole essay where I write about swimming memories. And I realised as I was writing it that there was this massive chunk of time missing from my memories of swimming. And it very quickly took the lid off quite a lot that I hadn't properly admitted to myself or worked through yet. So that was a particularly, I think, therapeutic and cathartic experience writing that essay. And actually I wrote it very much for myself. And I think at the time, if I'd thought I would share it, I might not have written it quite as honestly. And once I had, I then felt sort of, I think, frustrated that I'd gone through all of that, and felt then compelled to share it, in case, because I felt so sure that other people had too, some kind of version of that story. So I felt frustrated I hadn't read any, and that no one talked about it. So I wanted to publish it then once it was written. But
No. I was going to say I thought it's very brave of you, and I thought also the thing that is that you're writing about something that none of us would like to admit, but many of us have had, have had a horrible time with acne, and so I thought it was quite telling. Now, Arthur, you wrote the shortest question I think we've ever had, and I think it was actually you were just sort of having a second guess at Marsden Moor, but would you? Is there a question behind that?
No, I may have misheard it. I thought it was Marsden Moor.
no, sorry, Marsden.
Marsden. Oh, I was thinking Marsden Moor, some sort of Cromwellian skirmish, I think.
Right, yeah, no.
Still, if I could just change the subject entirely, I recently wrote a memoir about my early childhood days on living next to a beach in Kent, which largely revolved around the flint pebbles. And it made me think about the impact that place has on a small child, those formative years. And these pebbles, given that, it was part of our playground, formed a sort of huge part of the friends and brothers culture. I mean, we used the pebbles in 101 different ways. And some of them were very creative and some of them were very destructive. So, yeah, it was a really sort of enjoyable piece to write, because it certainly made me think about not just the opportunities, but also the limitations of just living next to a pebble beach. You can't play football on a pebble beach. So, we all grew up to be crap footballers, but we were good at throwing things. Food for thought.
Yeah. No, and I think when it comes to memoir writing, starting with something like place or an object as a really good way of then revealing a whole story that comes from that. You sort of, it's for me, I like to sort of anchor what I'm trying to write about in something physical, like a pebble beach or a piece of sea glass or a tiny dictionary. And it's amazing what can come out of that. Yeah.
But what could you draw on from your experiences of the place that you lived before you were 10 years of age? I mean,
I think, especially on the sort of coastal theme, where I grew up has one of the biggest tidal ranges in the world, on the south coast of Wales, and the tidal range was like a mile, and it was, for most of the day, it was just mud. And sometimes, I remember on a couple of occasions, me and my friends tried to go in the water, and we got so muddy and filthy. It was just a lost cause. And while swimming wasn't really a thing, and so the sea felt a little bit out of reach, even though it was right there. It was also very silty, muddy estuary water. So even though I lived right on the sea, it was more just to be looked at.
Right.
Yeah.
So yes, mud has featured in your life in a big way. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, okay, so moving on a little bit, I'm quite interested in the way you actually write, Kathryn. So where you write, when you write, how you write, you know, do you do lots of drafts? You know, how's it happen?
I think because each essay is quite different, often the process looks quite different, depending on how difficult the essay is to write. Some are much harder to write than others, depending on sort of how ambitious I've been with the structure and the content. And sometimes I know exactly where I'm going start to finish, and sometimes actually I've sort of allowed myself to find out along the way what it's really about. So it does change depending on the essay, what that process looks like. So I don't really have a sort of a nicely packaged author, like sort of writer routine. But as much as I would love to, but I have gotten better at redrafting, and I think it's because I found the right form for me. So when I used to write fiction, I really struggled to know when a scene was finished or a chapter was finished, and often I would kind of I didn't want to overwork it, so I kind of would just move on and be like, okay, well, that'll have to do. Whereas with the nonfiction, it feels, for me, it comes together in a much clearer way in my mind. It feels a lot more like fitting pieces together of a puzzle. And so you know when they fit, you know when you've moved them around enough and that they're finally in the places they're meant to be. So for me, with nonfiction, I can sort of more confidently redraft if I need to and know that I need to. Whereas with fiction, I was often like, should I redraft it, or am I going to ruin it if I redraft it? And yeah, so I've become more of a redrafter, and I think Nature of Change, which is that one with Marsden Moores, was redrafted the most times because it was a little bit of a challenge, that one, to get everything in that I wanted to get in.
Yeah, Arthur said it must be a good feeling getting your first book published.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a bit surreal, actually, because I've worked in publishing for quite a while, and I've also worked in sort of the literature sector as a producer. So I've worked with a lot of authors, and I've supported a lot of other authors, and I've run a lot of book events with new authors. So to be finally on the other side of that felt very nice.
That's good. Now, has anyone else got any questions they want to pitch at Kathryn at the stage?
Yeah, I'm really interested in the fact that you could think about using essay as a form for memoir, because I have actually drafted a memoir. So I've got up to 60,000 words or something, and then I felt very compelled to kind of link all the chapters and do it as a consecutive narrative. And I'm just now thinking I'm quite good, and then I haven't gone back to it, because I know it's not finished, and I just wanted to get the narrative down, and that was quite nearly 10 years ago now, but it feels like it needs finishing. I think if I thought about it as a series of essays, I might suddenly feel really liberated, because there might be a theme that keeps going, but I wouldn't have to join up all the stuff between the essays. So I'm just sort of, I suppose, you know, it sounds like people are telling you it's a memoir, but how joined up are they in terms of a series of 12, and does it reveal a sort of a bigger narrative around yourself, I suppose?
So I approached them all very separately, the essays, but I think because there's natural themes because I've written them, if that makes sense, and because I've willingly put myself into the essays, and because I wrote them all in a sort of similar period of my life. There is a bit of a running theme of sort of coming of age and developing a relationship with nature, with myself, with my memories, and with the people around me. And I think I came at it from the other way of sort of wanting to write essays and ending up sort of writing memoir, partly because I actually found myself putting myself in more because it seemed to make the essays better. It seemed to make them more compelling, and it made me feel better when I was talking about ideas, very much attaching them to me, because I didn't want to make any assumptions or tell people what was right and wrong, or it was just I wanted to just show my experience in the hope that other people could relate and think about what theirs is. So that's why it sort of turned more towards memoir. But I think what I really liked about it was that it allowed me to focus on something specific in each one. So it felt, I think I really admire people who can write memoir in one big chunk, in one narrative, because it's so slippery when you've got so many memories, so many things you want to write about, so many people, so many experiences. Having, well, like I was saying earlier, having a place or an object or a memory to pin your ideas to really helps add some like gravitational pull to your ideas and sort of keep them grounded. It's very easy for it to get, I think, to let it get away from you with nonfiction, and the reader suddenly feels a little bit lost. And so you have to have ways of bringing them back to earth. And I found physical places and also visceral memories were a good way of doing that, of sort of putting in hand and footholds for the reader. So I think you could take some of that in a longer narrative memoir, sort of have focuses in themes in your chapters, or like you said, you could approach them like essays, knowing that naturally there will be a narrative that will show through that.
That's really inspiring. I think I might have just got some of the drive back to go back to it, because I think if I looked at it in that different way, it would really help. So
yeah, it's definitely worth a try.
I could leave out the bits I don't really want to write about or don't really want other people to see.
Yeah, it sort of means you can really have control over what you do and don't write about, and like there's loads that I don't write about, which I think is why I found it surprising that it was seen as memoir, because I'm so specific in each essay about what I'm talking about, and because I'm like, well, this is what the essay is about, I don't have to talk about anything that's not relevant to that idea. So yeah.
Yeah, and
thank you.
Yeah, if I can chip in too, I mean, I think there's a difference between writing an autobiography and writing memoir. Memoirs can be, I'm not suggesting lightweight, but they can be shallower. You don't have to go into sort of quite as much sort of kind of detail and building up the sequence and things like that. But it's really up to you. And I think Kathryn's book is a really good example of memoir. And of course, those of you who joined us for Noreen Massoud's A Flat Place, that was similar. That was a memoir. It wasn't autobiographical. It was autobiographical, but it wasn't just autobiography. It was a lot more inside. Okay, so Arthur, you're pitching in with a couple of good ones. So have a go. Say hello again.
Well, yeah, I mean, nature writing's been around for a long time now, and just like nature, I suppose it's got to keep evolving, to stay fresh. One can only read so many books about sort of beautiful swans and leafy places. So, just wondering whether, I mean, crystal ball gazing, you must be thinking about, ideas for the future, which don't necessarily echo stuff which people were writing about 5 years ago. So I don't know, is nature writing in danger of stagnating, or is there plenty of scope in the future for new ideas?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, and that idea about the genre of nature writing, and it does have a certain certain associations. And I think when I was writing this collection, I was really worried. I wasn't really willing to call myself a nature writer because I'm not an expert in anything. I don't know all the names of all the birds, and I haven't been to lots of remote, amazing places. So I sort of felt, but then I realized, well, I want to write about nature as, for want of a better phrase, the average person. Just, someone who steps outside their front door and enjoys being outside, whatever that looks like. And so I think nature writing needs to encompass more. And also, for me, the best nature writing absolutely is not just about nature, which is why it's not a great label, really, because most of the best nature books are about people or about just a lot more than a place. Often it's a lovely way to hold a story, but not necessarily the crux of that story. So yeah, I think we just need to have an open mind of what nature writing is and can be, and also not. And things don't have to only be in one category or another, because like I said earlier, my essays are about all sorts of things. But nature writing definitely runs through it as something that pops up more probably than anything else.
Mix it up, in other words.
Yeah, I think so, and not feel too it's tricky because publishing needs labels. They're really useful, they're necessary, but just to not feel bound at all by one label or another, and not criticize something for not being, typical nature writing or yeah.
Yeah, Anne-Marie has just written in. She said, I can't remember the word you used to describe how Seaglass is made, but a sort of co-production of humans and nature.
Yeah. I think in the book I said something like a relay race between us and the sea, of it being, especially with Siam, it's being really handed back and then it's coming in and out constantly, and it was made, the glass is made from sand in the first place, so it's this real team effort.
Kathryn, you have the last word.
Yeah, and I remembered Arthur asked earlier about favorite reads, so thanks for asking again. My one that I always say for this, and it's particularly interesting, I think, to people who like walking literature, is Kathleen Jamie's essays. She is an absolutely brilliant essayist, and if you haven't read particularly her first 3 collections, Findings, Sightlines and Surfacing, I thoroughly recommend them, and I think that is what the sort of nature essay can be at its best. And another one I wanted to mention, actually, not because it's my favorite, but I'm reading it at the moment and it's really good, and I think, was it Ali who is hoping to rework your memoir, is Anne Patchett's essay collection These Precious Days. I think that's a really lovely example of memoir through essays, and how memoir doesn't always have to be dreary. Yeah,
What's
those are
the author? The Precious Days?
Anne Patchett.
Okay.
These Precious Days.
Brilliant, thank you.
But yeah, other than that, thank you everyone. This was really lovely. A nice way to spend a Tuesday evening.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks a lot, Kathryn, and thanks to everyone for coming along.